what you just said.
So he goes in two directions. First, in the first of these, he's asking, okay, what about the one if the one is not?
Okay.
And he ends up with the many, the pola, right? The
Right.
proper name. Now, he doesn't take it far enough, and that's Badiou's critique, because of this question of the one versus oneness. But then he wants to look at the others. This is where he looks at the others, and he gets this proliferation to infinity.
So rather than one being oneness, it's the one being multiple on outside. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you may have just said it, but how can he still, if he says the one is not, how does he still have the one on this side?
How does he still have the one?
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't. He's saying if the one is not, what's the consequence in terms of the one not being? And the consequence is we have this minimal being of the one, namely that it is non-being.
Oh, right, yeah.
And that's the proper name.
Then is it the case that it's one is inconsistent insofar as, right, the one can be many?
Right.
Okay.
Wait, hold on a second.
I mean,
say that again.
I mean a very consistent, sorry. I mean this in, right, this is going back to Socrates' criticisms, where he says, I am one, but I am also many, right? I am one in account of people of seven, right? I am Socrates as one, but also I have many parts.
I think that actually goes in the other direction towards the dream, right? Which is if there is no one, then it's just endless multiplicity of multiplicities. And actually, this was a question I wanted to ask you, Joe, and if this is a tangent, we can leave it for another time. But it seems to go towards the poloi, or the pola, right, is to enter into this aporia, which is the proper name of the nothing, which, at least to me, seems like an incredibly Heideggerian move, right, is to be cast in through the thinking of the one, right, to thinking of being as such, right, throws oneself into the danger of the many, or perhaps I might say the all too many, right, which then obscures, right, the aporia, which would be the name of the nothing.
Yeah, that's right. And Badiou sees Plato going beyond Heidegger in that sense, because he goes all the way to the minimal link of being, which is nothing but the proper name. And if, again, way beyond Levinas already. There's a book on proper names you can read on there too.
Sorry, not a Levinas fan.
So, that is more or less, is there anything else I want to say about Plato? Oh, I do want to say this. So then, what Badiou points out, and this is where I think Badiou's reading of Plato is so important for Badiou's larger project, besides stealing Pentagram, is that if Plato doesn't quite go far enough here in separating the one from oneness, from the one as being and oneness as an operation, he says he does elsewhere in his dialogues go so far. For one, he refuses to assign one to the forms. There is no form of the one. And he says the other crucial thing, and still more crucial, is that Plato is constantly thinking this entanglement when he's talking about participation in the forms. The very idea of participation is a probing of this distinction. And so Badiou's almost baffled that Plato didn't get all the way to Badiou. For that reason, if there are questions about that, let me put them off for just a moment. Because I think that what Badiou then is telling us, though I don't think he even recognized it in '88 when he wrote this, but he did afterward, is that basically his project is a completion of Plato. He wants to go back and say, now that we've got the means to go all the way through the Kantorian ontology here, and we can see that this needs to be pushed after, especially after Lacan, that this needs to be pushed all the way to think of oneness only as an operation. There is some oneness. Then we can actually bring Plato to completion. And rather than being anti-philosophical, we've actually got to launch a fully philosophical project and finish off Plato's work.
So then is it the case that, right, so after Parmenides, right, he reconstructs the forms going into, starting Thetis, but more specifically in the Sophists, which he makes mention to, right, you get these sort of vowel forms and all what Badiou claims of it. He says, this is on 37, one can then understand why there is not, strictly speaking, an idea of the one. In the Sophists, Plato enumerates what he calls the supreme genres, the absolutely foundational dialectical ideas. These 5 ideas are being, movement, rest, the same, and the other, which, when I talked about them in Mike Shaw's class, it was, you have being, you have movement, rest, either, maybe one of them was changed, but we'll just say movement, rest, but then the like and the unlike. Right. But the idea of the one is not included for no other reason, and then the one is not. no separable being of the one is conceivable, and in the end, this is what Parmenides establishes. The one may solely be found at the principle of the idea grasped in its operation of participation rather than in its being. The there is oneness concerns that any idea whatsoever, inasmuch as it carries out the count of a multiple and brings about the one, being that on the basis of which is ensured that such or such an existing thing is this or that. So do you see Badiou as sort of agreeing with Plato's move in the sophist, like moving towards these sort of participation forms, where how the forms sort of mix, they blend is actually, I think, what Plato's language in the sophist, these sort of blending of the forms to get actual other forms.
Yeah, I think that's right. Except that the forms for Badiou, then he's going to rigorously reconceive them as truths. The forms are now going to be truths: political truths, amorous truths, artistic truths, scientific truths.
Okay.
And those participation in those is going to be the moment of the subject, right? Participation in those in a faithful way. But yeah, so that completion of Plato's project is it's got various vicissitudes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that's right. He's trying to take that very project and radicalize it.
But he just sees Plato doing it in a very crude fashion in lieu of not having set theory.
In lieu of not having set theory, in lieu of not having the Lacanian, a number of Lacanian insights.
Which is, sorry to interject, another reason why Badiou's Platonism is not the traditional notion of philosophical Platonism, because it doesn't have, he recognizes that Plato's mistake, this is a common prejudice among philosophers, is that the previous philosophers' mistake was they just weren't smart enough.
Right.
They just didn't get it enough. But Badiou's point as a materialist is, no, there are developments in human existence that, as a matter of fact, allow for new philosophical work to be done, for new philosophical insights to be gained, rather than there's a divine external idealist truth that we just simply uncover. Or even in its newest iteration of this sort of notion, that there is an inner truth to our being there that is veiled from us, and that we simply need to uncover this ourselves, right? Our being there in its own most.
Right.
To take the Heideggerian.
So that there are three things that have preceded Badiou that make it possible to go further than Plato could have, right? And so, as you mentioned, right, one is going to be science with the dawn of Cantorian set theory. Another one is going to be the Lacanian break with the subject and so forth. And then the third one is going to be the new this new dawning epic of truth. Okay. That's it. But with all of that now, let's go back to Plato, unearth him, resurrect him, as Badiou would say after Logics of Worlds. So that does meditation too, unless there's anything else we want to do. So meditations 3, 4, and 5 are all, if you're not familiar with set theory, they're probably a little tough. But they're actually, I think, much simpler than the first two meditations. There's a lot more groundwork and heavy lifting, I think, in meditations 1 and 2.
Before we get started on this, does anybody actually want to take a quick break or no? Do you want to take a
I'm
break?
easy.
I'm up with